Of NYU Washington, D.C., and I'm very happy to welcome you to the Abramson Family Auditorium for our panel tonight, Careers in a Global Economy, which is being held as part of our Career Week. In addition to our students who are in attendance, yay students, I would like to make a special welcome to our NYU alumni and other guests who have joined us this evening. We hope you enjoy the event and that you'll return for many more. As the global economy grows, borders become less defined, especially as they translate into international careers in global organizations. To guide us through this discussion, I'd like to welcome Trudy Steinfeld, Assistant Vice President and Executive Director of NYU's Wasserman Career Development Center, who will be moderating our panel tonight. Trudy has extensive experience in the field of career development, experiential education, and recruiting, and is considered a national expert on the job market and employment trends. She's been a frequent contributor to nearly every major media outlet you can think of in the United States. Trudy, thank you for moderating this evening, and once again, thank you all for joining us.
Hi, thanks so much for being here tonight. So I gave the panelists some ground rules for tonight. So we're going to kick it off in a moment, but certainly we want to leave time for questions at the end. And you should all, I think everybody's aware that we're streaming this as well. So you see the cameras, it's being recorded. So, just watch some of your movements so they're not picked up, Anyway, what I'd like to do, first of all, I really appreciative that you're all here. I'm going to ask the panel to briefly introduce themselves, talk a little bit about what they do now, and maybe just 2 minutes each about some of their academic training, but some of their other work experience, and then we'll kick it off that way. So I just want to say I'm so glad that Dave Ong is sitting right to the left of me. Besides being a dear friend, Dave is actually the only person on the panel who's not an NYU alum, but he has done so much for NYU, always speaks on panels in DC, he's in the DC area, comes and recruits and hires our students like mad. So I feel like he's an honorary NYU guy. And, I've seen he has purple ties. So, okay. So Dave Ong.
Oh, thank you, Trudy. Is the mic working okay? Mm-hmm. Great. Well, she just stole my thunder. My name is Dave Ong. I'm actually the Director of Corporate Recruiting for a company called Maximus. We're based in the Northern Virginia area, and we focus on government services, primarily those services that focus on either public health care or social services solutions. So global company, we're up to about 14,000 employees worldwide, and we have operations in the United States, Saudi Arabia, Australia, Canada, and the UK, amongst others. As Trudy mentioned, I've had a long-standing relationship with NYU. Prior to joining Maximus about 11 years ago, I actually have managed campus recruiting programs at Booz Allen Hamilton Consulting here in DC, Citigroup Corporate Investment Bank in New York, and Capital One in Richmond, Virginia, amongst other places. And what was the other parts? I'm a University of Richmond graduate, sorry, again, no official NYU ties, but I do feel like I've spent enough time there where is that honorary degree you were promising me?
It's coming.
I thought it was going to be conferred in a special ceremony.
He said he'd rather be a violet than a spider, aren't they spiders at the University of Richmond? Yeah, okay.
And in my side job, like Trudy and some other people in our industry, I actually volunteer a lot of time with the National Association of Colleges and Employers, which is the nonprofit responsible in the United States for promoting the hiring of the college educated. So,
thanks. Jasmine?
So I'm Jasmine Chan. I work at Ernst & Young, and what I do there is I oversee their internal communication strategy. EY is currently 200,000 employees and growing, so as external communications are important, so is internal communications, making sure that all our people are aligned with what the firm is trying to do and sort of comfortable doing their jobs, and that's kind of my remit to make sure that they're all well informed. I come from a corporate public relations background. I worked at a PR agency called Edelman in 4 of their offices, and before my current position I was in marketing at an insurance and risk management firm here in DC. And when I'm not doing all that, I serve on the board of directors of the Conference on Asian Pacific American Leadership, which is a nonprofit dedicated to increasing APA participation in the public sector. So that takes up a lot of my spare time. I graduated from NYU in 2008 and got my bachelor's there before going on to the London School of Economics for my master's degree. So.
Great. Chuck?
Yep. I am the Assistant Administrator for Legislative and Public Affairs at the United States Agency for International Development. Our department is about 80 people. Our agency is about 10,000 staff around the world. We have about over 70 missions around the world. We are together we work closely with OPIC. We are the U.S. government's international development agency. And so I'm responsible for all congressional affairs as well as all press, media relations, public engagement at the agency. I had been on the Hill for about 15 years before coming to USAID. I worked as the staff director of the Democratic Policy Committee in the Senate. And I worked for Senator Daschle, Majority Leader Daschle and Majority Leader Reid. Before the Hill, I was a trial lawyer. I worked in Cleveland doing trial work for about 8 or 9 years before I went to NYU, got a master's degree, and repositioned my career and came to Washington to work on the Hill.
Kevin?
I'm Kevin Rose. I'm a partner with Deloitte Consulting. I work as part of our strategy practice, and I focus on financial services companies. I've been with Deloitte for about a dozen years. Prior to that, I worked with JP Morgan and Bear Stearns, and I have my MBA from NYU's Stern School of Business. In addition to the work I do with clients, I also play internal roles for Deloitte, including one of 4 partners who oversees our analyst program nationally. So this is our strategy and operations program where we have individuals coming out of college and helping them to acclimate to the firm and helping them really think about their careers at Deloitte.
Great. Thank you. Iman?
Hi, I'm Iman Kennerly. I'm a Director of Finance, SME Finance at the Overseas Private Investment Corporation. And yes, we are the little brother agency to USAID, and we serve as the United States government's development finance institution. In my role as Director of SME Finance, I'm responsible for originating direct loans and project financings in various industries with a particular focus on real estate-related sectors like housing and commercial office space and commercial real estate development. In that capacity, I get to do cool things like last week, spending a week in Yangon, Burma, doing due diligence on an investment in commercial real estate in that market where there is none. There practically is none. Our agency is a smaller agency. We're about 200 head count. We have other financial products that we use to support U.S. investment abroad, such as political risk insurance, as well as fund-to-fund investments in private equity funds. And I've been at OPIC for 10 years now in various capacities, initially with our political risk insurance group, and the latter 7 years with our finance department. Prior to that, I earned my MBA at Stern and spent some time on Wall Street prior to that.
Great. So in addition to the alumni we have in the audience, we also have a number of our students. And, I think it's really important to kind of take a step back and think when you were in their shoes. And what would I doubt that any of you thought that the job you're in now, if you could have projected years from when you graduated, that you were going to be in this job. So, and Jasmine, I'll start with you. I'll put you on the spot. If you can talk about what you were really seeing for yourself and sort of talk a little bit about what are some of the key things that led you to this job and to this career. What are some of those key things that you want the audience to know as they're thinking about their next move?
Yeah, I think certainly when I was at NYU, during my bachelor's, I think at that point, like most people at that level, I didn't have very much work experience, and the only thing I really had to go on was I know sort of at the very high level the soft skills that I'm good at. I knew I was fairly good at writing. I knew I was pretty analytical. I knew I liked working with people and sort of interacting with people on a daily basis. I am an ENTJ, if people know the Myers-Briggs. type. So like basic, really soft skills like that, and I thought, well, I don't know very much about the business world or the working world, but I was pretty committed to finding internships, paid or unpaid, that would kind of let me use these softer skills and gain the real world experience that I knew would be critical, when I graduated from college. And I think that's something I would encourage people in that sort of second or third year in college to really think about what are the inherent skill sets that you either know you already have or are working on, through your academics at school, and try to align that with maybe not a specific job because it's quite difficult, but at least different career fields that you feel might be relevant, that might match well, and sort of start from there. I think it can be very, very overwhelming. But luckily there are resources like the Wasserman Center, where there's sort of like tons and tons of listings, but sort of trying to figure out at a very high level, sort of, let's say, top 5 fields where you feel like your skills might be relevant and where you might be able to bring value. I think that might be a good place to start.
Kevin?
Yeah, so I guess if I think back to when I was in school and what I was envisioning for myself at that time, I never really thought in more than 2-year increments, right? I remember thinking to myself, I wanted to do consulting. I thought it was interesting, something that I was excited about, passionate about, but in my wildest dreams, I always assumed that was a 2-year deal, and then I'd go figure out what happens next. And the way I've sort of thought about my career is continually almost a 2-year series of 2-year contracts, where I constantly sort of renew for myself, this is what I still want to do. And if I think back to what that really meant when I was a student, what it really means is you don't necessarily have to know everything as a student, right? You don't necessarily have to have all the answers, right? Sometimes what makes sense is taking a shot at something, kind of guiding yourself towards something you want to do for a short period of time, and then letting your career evolve and sort of determining, based on the situation that you find yourself in, what's the right thing for you that comes next. I guess that's probably the biggest thing that I was, as I sort of think back to it, that's kind of the biggest thing that really strikes me about my time back then.
Chuck, did you want to?
So when I was an undergraduate, I really had 2 passions, and one was the law, or I thought I did, the law and politics. And I was an English literature major, and I was a political science major, and I thought, I don't know how this is going to play out, but ultimately I know that's where I really feel that I want to be, and that's where my passion is. And so I made the decision to go to law school, and I was thinking, do I go to Washington and pursue the policy and politics, or do I practice law first? And I think one of the things, and it's similar to what Kevin had said, what I decided I was going to take it one step at a time, and so go to law school and practice law and see how I liked it, see what that experience was like, see what I was learning, see how it felt, was it consistent with where I wanted to be, and on the basis of that, make your next move and decide where you want to go next. But I think it's no matter where you start out, I think it's really important to just really focus on doing as high quality work as you can do. And so much of it is based on merit. It is a lot, especially in Washington and all over. It's a lot about who you know, but it's really about the quality of the work that you do and the quality of the relationships that you're able to develop from a networking standpoint. Are you known for being responsive, and are you following through, and is the work that you're doing high quality? Are you trustworthy? Do you have a certain amount of emotional intelligence that's exhibited in your position that you're in? And based on the people that you're working with in that position, I think that's where the network has to start, because those are the people who have sort of the deepest knowledge of your work. And as they get to know you, as they trust you, as they think that you're doing high quality work, then you can leverage that to the next position. And hopefully you're in a position, because you're showing that you're of high value and there's value add, that you're able to be somewhat selective about what the next step is. And the best of all possible worlds is to have people come to you and to say, I've got a great opportunity, we'd love for you to join us. And if not, then at least you're well positioned to be looking for the next position. But it's basically sort of step by step, taking that experience and thinking about long term, I have some idea of where I want to go, but based on this job right now, what do I think is the next best step, and what are the opportunities that are going to lead me there?
Who'd like to?
I can add just one quick point. I agree with everything that's been said there wholeheartedly. The only other thing I would add is that if you had told me 28 years ago when I graduated from college that I was going to be a human resources executive at this point in my life, I would have handed you a gun and said, shoot me. because of the way that I thought of HR growing up and having my parents and having some issues with HR departments at their respective companies. It just didn't seem like where I thought my career would go. I always thought that I'd be in sales or marketing and be a marketing executive at some point. And that's kind of the way my career started out for the first 8 or 9 years. And then I remember getting a phone call to join Capital One, this idea that they wanted to hire people that had some sales and marketing background, but also had some project management skills, that were good analytically. And this was at a time when they were spinning off from Signet Bank and getting ready to go public. So I asked them exactly, what kind of job do you want me to do? And they said, well, we'd like to hire you as a project manager and then just plug you in to a couple different areas. And ironically, the first place they put me was in HR. And I was thinking, what the heck has happened here? And I found that as I got deeper and deeper into it, that there were parts of human resources, specifically recruiting, that could utilize the sales and marketing skills that I gained over the previous 8 or 10 years of work. And then on top of that, maybe about a year into my recruiting career, I was working for the head of HR for the company, just kind of on a lark. He'd actually replaced my boss for a short-term period of time. I remember he sat me down for my first review and said, we've had 3 interactions in the last year. I know nothing about your day-to-day performance other than the metrics I'm seeing here. Congratulations, I'm promoting you, but you're moving to college recruiting. And I said, okay, and didn't really know exactly why he was doing that. I just had to kind of trust his judgment. And then 18 years later, I'm still in that industry. And it's really what lit my fires. It's the thing that got me out of bed every morning, it got me excited, got me nervous. And I don't think that I would have done that if I hadn't kept a relatively open mind. So I think that's the moral to this story, is that you never know where that opportunity is going to come from. And I think particularly those of you that are really just starting out your careers, when you're doing that first internship search or that first full-time job search, there's a lot to be said for checking out as many opportunities that are out there, not being so single-minded all the time.
Yeah. Iman?
Yeah, I would say that definitely agree, and I think that my career path, there was a lot of serendipity involved early on, and so if I went back and tried to make a plan out of it, I would say that part of that serendipitous path that helped me was early on getting the opportunity to really develop my technical skills relatively early in my career. I took a position on Wall Street, first an internship and then a full-time job on Wall Street, really because of the challenge and because it was very exciting, not realizing how much technical experience that I would be able to develop so early in my career. And that technical expertise later on I was able to use that to differentiate myself when I was going through the hiring process during and post-graduate school, post-MBA, just because there are a lot of your competition, while they might have a lot of theoretical expertise and the fact of the matter is, early stage career candidates don't normally have a lot of technical experience, and I felt like that was a way that I was able to compete and differentiate myself against other candidates. When I started applying to OPIC after doing an internship there, I remember after I got hired eventually for a full-time position, one of my colleagues was saying that she recalled seeing my application when I was in grad school for a full-time position, and how the hiring panel actually laughed. Like, they were really laughing, not because I was necessarily a bad candidate, but just because I was so aggressive in the position that I was pursuing, because I was underqualified. And but within a couple of years of being at OPIC, I was on the same level of these same people that were laughing at my application. And I think a lot of the reason that I was able to get there so fast is the technical skills. And then the second part of it is, once you're in there, to develop transferable skills that will allow you to get the exposure to either project management or just intermediate managerial level experience that will allow you to advance. So again, going back to my career path, I would say and advise others to pursue those, whatever your field is, pursue those technical areas that will differentiate yourself. And then once you're in the door, wherever you get in the door in your field, try to develop managerial skills or transferable skills that will allow you to be selected for advancement once you're there.
It's great. So Michael mentioned in the introduction of this panel that, there's really this focus on a global workplace. And all of you work, whether it's for government agencies or for-profit entities, organizations that do global work and are positioned globally, and you've all traveled for your work. A lot of our students, because NYU is such a globally focused place, really have an interest in getting involved in global work. And I think there's a lot of different opinions about how best to position yourself for that. So, Iman, let me start with you. And any tips you can give to really how you think about positioning yourself for a global career. And the other thing I'd like you to just comment, did you all see yourselves doing something globally? I mean, you all mentioned different passions, but I didn't hear anybody say, well, I knew I wanted to travel the world and do that as part of my job. So can you integrate that?
Yeah, definitely. Early on, I realized that I wanted to enter the international finance or the international policy space. And by the time I got to pursuing my MBA, I knew that I was going to do international banking work in China. So I'm getting my MBA, I'm taking my Mandarin lessons throughout my MBA, and since then I've never done any work in China, never used Mandarin at all. And the thing I learned from that really is, while it's good for you to be able to make your case around you as a candidate for a certain niche and to develop some, just get some exposure and develop some expertise around certain niche areas, that's not necessarily where you're going to end up with your career. So it's good to brand yourself in a certain way, but you also have to be flexible enough to use that experience and that exposure to work in different areas, different markets, because that's what people are looking for. They're not necessarily looking for a narrow expertise when it comes to international development. So now I work, I mentioned I was in Burma last week. Over the past year, I've been working on projects in Guatemala, South Sudan, and it's really just that early exposure and that early focus on China that I've been able to roll in, just understanding different markets that has allowed me to remain flexible and to allow my career to advance. One other thing I would mention is, I talked about Mandarin, trying to learn Mandarin. Earlier in my undergraduate and high school days, I studied a lot of Spanish. I studied abroad in Spain. And when I started my career at OPIC, I tried to polish off my Spanish, didn't use it for several years. The reality is, while there are a lot of career paths that will require you to learn a language and to know a language, I found that you can always get a translator. So where I've had to, I've relied on a translator. But this past summer, I was in Guatemala working on a transaction, and we had a translator, but it became so cumbersome using the translator that I had to conjure up some of my intermediate, basic, slightly advanced Spanish from several years ago to facilitate our meeting. So, really that's what people need, in order to navigate this career field, is the flexibility and the ability to respond when you need to. That's what people are looking for.
Kevin?
Yeah, so for those who are not familiar with Deloitte, we're a global firm. We have offices in more countries than I even know, to be honest with you, at this point. And one of the reasons we do that is because we want to be able to serve our clients on a global basis, right? Our clients typically don't operate within one country, right? They operate within multiple countries. They're going global. We need to go global to respond to that. For me, what's interesting about all this is that, back when I was in college and then in business school, in all the the thinking that I did in terms of what I might have wanted to do, global wasn't actually even in my radar. Right? I hadn't even thought about it. Right? That wasn't something I really considered. Wasn't really something I thought about. A lot of my friends did. People were very excited by international travel. That's an exciting thing to be able to do. But for me, it wasn't really part of the game. The reason it became part of the game and became an important thing for me, even to the point of I actually flew in from Toronto this morning. I don't know if we count Canada as global or not, but sure, right? The reason it became part of the game was because What I recognize is in order to do the right thing by my clients and in order to be able to serve them properly, I had to have an open mind. I'd have to have an understanding of what it means to operate in a global economy, right? So when I sort of take that back and think about, well, for you guys sitting in the audience and thinking about your careers and thinking about what you want to do and what makes you the most, I would call it, attractive individual for a global organization, I actually think a lot of it has to do almost with your mindset, right? Really trying to take a broad perspective, right? Not necessarily thinking about the work that you're going to do just in terms of, kind of the narrow window that you might feel it's in, right? But starting to think more broadly and think about what are the implications globally, right? How does what I do today, regardless of what industry, what field, whatever it may be, how does that actually have an impact on the global economy overall, right? What does it mean? And when you start to take that kind of perspective, people start to recognize that, and people start to see you as someone who's actually thinking more broadly and someone who thinks, on a much more macro basis. And as people start to recognize, at least from my perspective, that's where you start to get the opportunities. Because you look at someone and you say, hey, that person gets it, that person understands. I can actually send that person to somewhere, another country and actually have them be impactful. So, just in terms of the way I think about it or the way I thought about it, right, didn't know much, but kind of figured it out. But as I look back and as I think about what makes the most successful individuals in the global economy, it's really people who take that kind of view.
So for me, when I work, obviously as a lawyer, well not obviously, but as a lawyer, I did trial work and there was no international connection. I came to Washington, I worked on the Democratic Policy Committee, and we did domestic and foreign policy. So I would say probably 2/3 domestic, maybe 1/3 or less foreign policy, and a little tiny sliver of that was international development. So when this opportunity came about, it wasn't as a result of a career-long plan that I would be working in a global setting for an international development agency. But the opportunity came, and I think what really attracted me was the mission. So I was more mission focused, and our mission is to eliminate extreme poverty around the world. It's kind of ambitious, but we basically have 10,000 people who are extremely committed to the mission. And that's what really attracted me. And in order for us to accomplish our mission, we have to be deployed around the world on behalf of the United States government and the people, the American people. So that's kind of how I got into it. It was the mission was attractive to me, and as a result of that, I pursued this position. But I think, what will make you successfully in the global context are many of the same skills that will make you successfully in the domestic context, which is, do you have, from my perspective, being a liberal arts major, I think it's just, critical thinking, the ability to assimilate information, understand it, sort of organize it conceptually, to be able to write effectively, to communicate effectively, all those sorts of skills. And then one of the things that was beneficial to me at NYU is being a liberal arts major, I was able to get more hard analytical skills. So I took accounting and finance and those sorts of things that I didn't have from an undergraduate perspective. But I think a lot of the skills are interchangeable, and a lot of it is about what you want. I mean, I think language is something that's important and is valuable to have. But otherwise, I think it's basically what's your passion, what's in your heart, and what sort of work do you want to do. And I think that if you have the skills, you're going to be successful in order to do that.
Jasmine?
Yeah, I mean, I think from my perspective, I always sort of knew that I would be working, if not abroad, but certainly in a global capacity. I grew up in Hong Kong, and I think Hong Kong is kind of one of those really unique places where you do see a confluence of many different cultures. And I think that basically informed largely my, not just professional outlook, but just personally as well. And so when it came time for the job search post-master's, I basically only looked at firms that had a global footprint, because I knew regardless of where I found an opportunity, and it just so happened that my first one out of grad school was actually in Los Angeles, but I wanted to work with a global firm with globally minded, or actually physically global clients. And so it's not just about, I wouldn't say it's just about the global company, but also that the clients they were serving, and this is at Edelman, were in industries that have a substantial global impact. So I was working on corporate reputation campaigns for Shell, so the energy sector obviously very international, worked for GE, so manufacturing, engineering, also very international. So that just sort of enabled me to not only travel, but also just to learn about different industries in a much more broader kind of international mindset. Not just looking at how the US energy policy might impact a company like Shell, but what's happening with, wind energy in Denmark. How is that impacting what Shell wants to do from a business perspective? So again, just, looking at, and there's more and more of these companies too. It's not just these big kind of behemoth multinationals that are global, but a lot of sort of smaller to mid-sized enterprises are too now. So I think the opportunities are increasing by the day. And I think part of it is also just putting your hand up, to be honest. I think if you're early in your career and you may not be at that stage where people automatically think of you as like the go-to person to put on a global assignment, just put your hand up. I mean, I think that's kind of what I did when I was, sort of early in my career. And then I found myself in the middle of Rotterdam in the Netherlands, running around trying to staff a client campaign and not speaking a word of Dutch. So I think it's just one of those things of being proactive and just being conscious of, where you fit in within a company or an agency that's kind of has a broader global mindset.
The only thing I can add to that is I'll maybe tie two ideas together. Chuck earlier was talking about the idea that at every stage of your career, but really so crucial in those first couple days on the job or the first couple months on the job, do high quality work from the get-go. That's one of those things that will get you noticed very quickly. And then to Jasmine's point, you need to raise your hand. They have to know that you're interested. But if you take a look at just the sheer numbers these days, having been in campus recruiting now for about 17, 18 years or so, there's been a profound shift in terms of the interest level that students have when they graduate from college to wanting to go to work globally. It wasn't as big a priority, say, for example, 9 or 10 years ago. But the way that the education system has changed, particularly higher education, exposing you to more global people. A lot of your campuses, quite frankly, have a lot more international students. So you get that kind of exposure much earlier in your life than a lot of folks that didn't go to school in the last 10 years or so. And then the fact that companies are starting to get more global multinational. So more people are interested in doing it now, but the reality is that they're not going to send every recent college graduate that raises their hand to do some kind of international assignment. That's where Chuck's advice that you really need to make sure that you're noticed early in your career in terms of having that capability of doing high quality work, because when they send you international to do that type of assignment, the game gets upped a little bit. You're going to have to show that not only do you have all these soft skills and hard skills, but you also have the instincts to work in a much more diverse or unfamiliar environment. And a lot of firms aren't going to take that chance with somebody that they haven't seen some kind of track record for.
So just building on that, Dave, and I'll go back to you on this, and anyone can add as well. I mean, we have, particularly in students who will be graduating in the next year or so, or in the next couple of years, I don't mean it in a negative context, an impatience about really wanting to hit the ground running. And some of the advice that all of you gave about demonstrating your skill sets, raising your hand, really being passionate about what you want to do. But if you were looking to really say, I definitely want to be abroad, if not my first job, down the road, are there particular skills that you think global employers value over others? And some of them were mentioned by the panel, but if you could just, each of you, articulate something, one or two things that you think is like absolutely necessary to have, or you're not going to be ever considered for one of these roles.
If you take a look at a lot of the surveys that are going on in HR, particularly the ones that relate to campus hiring, there seems to be a perceived skill gap from the way that students see themselves versus the way employers see those students or recent graduates in their first job. I think Trudy's seen a number of those as well. The number one skill that employers say that recent graduates probably overrate themselves to the highest degree is written communications. So I would tell you that if you're really looking at those skills that I really think are so crucial internationally, you've got to be able to communicate, and you've got to be able to communicate at different levels. You've got to be able to communicate with different styles and to different types of people. Certainly that involves language to a certain degree, but there's also a certain degree of knowledge, I think, in regards to situational communications, how to adjust your style to meet a certain audience. And I think if you're going to be working internationally, you're going to be meeting a lot of people that don't have a similar background to yourself. So I think the ability to make that adjustment, whether it's written, whether it's verbal, but again, the biggest focus these days you're seeing is that employers really feel that the generation of students graduating from college right now are far behind previous generations when it comes to written skills at this point. So.
Somebody else want to add to that?
Well, I would certainly back up the communication. I think without question, that might be the most important. And I definitely agree with the statement that says it's not always language per se, right? It's a broader capability to communicate well. I would add to that, I think there's an element of well, I'm not even sure how to categorize. I would almost call it exploration, right? A willingness to kind of go into a new environment, try something that may be totally different to you, right? And that's part of it, right? When you go to different countries and you're working internationally, you have to be pretty open to new experience and willing to sort of understand and really internalize, maybe the way other cultures are thinking about something, right? The way they're looking at a problem, the way they're looking at a situation. I think it's sort of a soft skill, and it's a very hard thing to kind of learn. I doubt there are classes per se that really teach that, right? But it's a skill that's really intrinsic. Or if you can sort of really think about that and try to shift your mindset to be able to understand how other cultures navigate the world, that's going to make you extremely valuable. And again, that's something that people will start to notice and start to realize when you do raise your hand, as Jasmine says, right? They'll start to understand, hey, that's the kind of thing I want to see in the people that I send abroad.
Anybody else want to add to that?
Yeah, I'll add. I mean, I think my key word that I was going to use as the answer is judgment. I think it's related to what David was saying. So often do I hear from global colleagues that like us Americans,
Yeah.
X, or those French people, X, Y, Z. And I think at the end of the day, there are different perceptions about how business is done in different markets across the world. And I think having the professional judgment to say, this is how you communicate to a certain audience, whether it's, a very senior, to partners at a firm, or regardless of kind of who the audience is, being mindful of kind of just cultural norms. And again, that is really hard. It's not something that you can just kind of like pick up overnight. And I think it comes with experience working with different kinds of people. But I would say that just having that mindfulness is super important, I think, because that's the number one thing people notice.
Yeah, I would say in a very junior capacity, coming out of undergrad, you need to be able to have the confidence to sell yourself and sell management on the idea that you can add value in going abroad. And it's not just a matter of trying to get a long-term assignment abroad, but just to even get exposure. As example, my first job out of undergrad, analyst for an investment bank, my senior managers that I work with, they did a lot of international travel, a lot of international road shows, and I would help prepare pitch books for them and prepare their travel for them. But I never had the confidence to say, hey, here's how I could add value if you take me along with you. So I spent my 2.5 years there never going abroad with them, never going on any of these international assignments. Not for the 2 or 3 weeks that they were abroad. I was still in headquarters in Manhattan. But when I got my first internship, my internship with OPIC during my MBA studies, I had the opportunity to work on a couple different projects abroad. And at that point, I had developed the confidence to say, hey, I can add value if you bring me along with you on this due diligence trip. And that's something that had never really happened at OPIC before, where they're taking interns, grad interns that are still in school, along with some of the senior professionals to conduct due diligence. But I was able to make the case, and a couple other interns that summer were able to make the case. So, we were the first class that actually started traveling. And now in my role, that's more of a managerial level, if there's the opportunity, I try and give that opportunity to the hungry and aggressive interns that try to make the case to me.
Chuck, please.
I think judgment is absolutely indispensable, and it's so difficult. You can't really learn it to some extent. Maybe you can through experience, but judgment is so important. I would also say resilience, adaptability, the ability to be a problem solver. I think what you have to be able to look at is from a strategic standpoint, what are the challenges that are coming, and how do you navigate around them? So I think problem solving is absolutely critical as well, and just an open-mindedness. I think from a cultural standpoint, I think you have to be, and a certain amount of humility is really important.
I'm so.
If I could just add one thing, one thing that's important to think about, and the way we're all talking about international, we're sort of using international to mean everywhere, right? There is obviously a distinction if you're very focused on a particular country. If your dream has always been to go work in China or to go work in India or to go work in a specific place, there are certainly some skills that you might want to accumulate relative to those specific places, immersing yourself in that culture in some way, going to visit, spending time there, studying abroad, things like that. So I just want to make that distinction because I think it is important. There are some very specific skills that you can use to navigate towards a country itself. I think we're all talking about global as broader global, right? And that mixes it up a lot, and that makes it a lot harder to pinpoint. So I just want to make that distinction.
Both Chuck and everybody said amazing things. Chuck and Kevin gave me actually a little segue to a small story. This way you get to pause and drink water for a moment.
Nice enough.
So several years ago, I was fortunate enough to go and spend some time at NYU in France and taught a couple of classes. And one of the things all the students said, there was 100 students, I remember at the time, they loved Paris, who wouldn't, and they all wanted to go and work in Paris. And this was sort of their dream. And so I put the questions to them. Okay, if you were applying for a job in France, let's pretend for a moment that all the immigration challenges that we have here in the US and abroad didn't exist. How would you talk about your skill set, and how would you tell your story about what you can do to add value, and how would you talk about your experience very specifically about NYU in France? The first things that the students would say, well, I love France. I've had to have great wine. I've had really great cheese. I've had really good food. And I stopped them because, of course, those are all things I enjoy also in France, not to mention the champagne caves. But I said, okay, day one, did you have problems with maybe where you were going to live? Yeah, I had to pull out my French immediately and start negotiating with my landlord. Okay, problem solving. I was looking for an opportunity to either volunteer or intern, and I had to demonstrate that I had a cultural sensitivity and understood not only some of the languages, but some of the subtleties about the French workplace. So I don't want to take too much time me speaking. The panel has a lot more to say, but I think being able to tell your story effectively, focusing on the skill sets that any employer is going to need, but specifically to that you can solve a problem, you can be the value add, you can raise your hand, and that you have, whatever it is, some kind of cultural competency and some kind of language skills or whatever it will take that they are seeking goes a long way, whether you're looking for a job in DC or you're looking for an organization that is positioned globally. So I just wanted to add that. I'm going to switch gears a little bit because I want to give the audience an opportunity to ask questions. But I believe that, as distinguished as you all are, nobody really does it without a network, without a person, a mentor, somebody who intervened or somehow you got the attention of, that they gave you some time. So I'd love if each of you could speak about that, the importance, the influence on your career, and also tell us a little bit about what happened. So, they're all looking at you.
They're all looking at me? Okay,
why.
that's fine. All right. It's funny because I literally just had a call with that mentor about 2 days ago, having said that, so the timing is good. I actually waited probably longer into my career to really find somebody that I thought to be a more formal mentor. And there's probably a lesson to be learned from that, but for me, I know that one of the questions I get a lot when I'm interviewing recent graduates is they want to find out more about the formal mentorship that the organization is going to provide for you. And I tell them the same thing that I would tell anybody off the street, is that I think that a company has an obligation to provide you with strong supervision and direction. A lot of companies have a formal mentorship program, and I think it's great to take advantage of that. But from my own personal standpoint, I've always found that the best mentorships are things that happened organically. Is that I've had mentors assigned to me at different points in my career. Sometimes I connected with them, sometimes I didn't. But if I look at the ones that I think are the most tried and true, and the one that I'm referring to in this case, it's actually an individual that I used to work with at Capital One about, probably 16, 17 years ago. And he was actually an internal client of mine. He headed up one of the major business operations units within Capital One. So I always saw him as somebody 3 or 4 levels above me when I was first starting out my campus recruiting career. But as I got through a lot more of our various endeavors and had worked through a lot more projects, we found that there was a personal connection that existed there beyond just the professional one. And at some point, I started to realize that this is somebody that I think I can safely go to for advice, whether it's advice related to Capital One or maybe about the next opportunity I'm looking for in the business world or even just personal things outside of that. So, for me, that's the one that has stuck around the longest. I have plenty of other people that I think of in the kind of mentor way, but if somebody asked me to put the, nail down on the one person that really has done it, it's the person that wasn't assigned to me. It's the one where I think the mentorship or the relationship grew into more of a mentorship type of relationship. But this is still the person I go to if I have a difficult internal client, say, for example, and I need an outside perspective as to how to navigate the waters. Or if I got some feedback on a performance review that I need to get some different perspective on, get a more objective point of view. This is the guy that I call, and this is somebody that's been retired now from the business world for 4 or 5 years, and I still think of him as my go-to mentor. So.
I would say there's a couple, but I think like David, there's one that sticks out in particular, and that was actually in my first job at Edelman, and he was my boss's boss. So he actually headed up the entire corporate public relations team in the office. And it just so happened, I think, like the organic kind of development, I think he and I really just clicked, even though we were many levels apart at the time, from a personality standpoint. And I think as time went on, as I sort of got on more and more projects that were part of his team, he could also see from a quality standpoint that I was someone who could be counted on to deliver sort of reliable work. And I think from then on, it sort of just evolved as I sort of rose through the ranks. And he did too. It was just interesting having someone to kind of bounce, because it was sort of this thing where he was facing the same sorts of sort of internal political issues that I was, but just at a different level. So that was kind of interesting, kind of almost doing a future exercise where you kind of look at yourself in 10 years, and I would say, I hope that I would be in his shoes one day. And also, I think it's the sort of thing where now that we're at different companies and we're in kind of different stages of our careers again, I would not hesitate to give him, shoot him a text, give him a call about anything at all. And I think part of that is also these kind of professional mentorship type things can evolve into really sort of personal relationships where you can sort of go to them for anything with regards to how do I maintain work-life balance, or just completely random requests that you feel like they sort of understand where you're coming from, and they can really provide perspective that you really wouldn't be able to find anywhere else. And I definitely credit that person with sort of guiding my initial career, certainly in terms of the types of work, communications work that I want to be doing, but also just more broadly as a role model as well. So I certainly feel like that was very important in the early stage of my career.
Please, Chuck.
So Dave said, I think that we connected, and Jasmine said that we clicked, and I think that's absolutely essential. I think chemistry is really important. And the other thing that was important to me throughout, and I've had 2 or 3 really close mentors, and the other thing that I think is really important is this sort of being together in this immersive experience. And the first mentor I had was at my law firm, and we were trying cases together. And we had a succession of very sort of big cases. And when you're trying cases, you're basically completely, you have tunnel vision. And that's the only thing that you're focused on. The hours are long. And you're very much focused on this common purpose. And he and I had that relationship. And then 2 or 3 other times successively in my career was this combination of feeling this sense of connection and chemistry, the sense that when you're just working crazy hours and you're completely absorbed in what you're doing, that you're on this you have this common purpose, but also just this sense of knowing and knowledge of who you are and kind of getting who you are. And as a result of that, I think the relationship, it can deepen, and the amount of learning that can happen is amazing. And also the extent to which you can push each other, and I think get to a place that as a result of that relationship, you may not have thought that you could have gotten to by yourself. So I think mentorship is absolutely critical. I do think it's more organic than sort of a formal setting. And I think you find them, I found them in the context of the work. And as a result of that, I think what you just have to really work on is staying connected as you both move on and do different things. It's easy to separate from those people throughout the course of your life and career who have really made a huge difference. And I think trying to work at maintaining the connection is important.
So to me, I would actually attribute a lot of the success that I've had to mentors. Frankly, it's a broad generalization, but I would say that throughout my career, as I look at others who I've seen who have done well, typically they're folks who have had good mentors who have shepherded them along and helped guide them through their career. The way I've always thought about and approached it is I've always looked for individuals who share the values that I have. So what I found is that people who not necessarily thought exactly the same, their ideas weren't necessarily the same, but they valued the same kinds of things that were important to me, whether that be family, whether that be aspects of my career, whether it be things that I wanted to do. When I found people who had a similar passion, those were people who I naturally brought in as my mentors and who naturally gravitated towards me as a mentee, right? And through that process, I've had some great ones. There's 3 or 4 in particular that, as I said, have really guided me along, and they're sort of still my go-tos for different aspects of my life, whether it be, what's my next step, or whether it be, what's the right work-life balance that I need to strike with my family. The other thing that I think is pretty important, and I suspect I speak for everyone on this panel when I say, I assume you're all giving back, right, in terms of mentorship now to others, right? It's kind of a really cool thing when you sort of get to a certain point in your career and you start to actually do the reverse. And you become the mentor, and there are others who start coming to you and start asking you a lot of questions. What I found about that, and you guys will all sort of get to this as you move along, you actually learn almost as much as you do from your mentors when you're actually mentoring someone else, because it gives you an opportunity to really reflect on what you're trying to do, as well as seeing yourself through their eyes, right? So it gets pretty interesting as you go along, but strongly suggest, if not absolutely think it's essential that everyone seeks out a really good mentor early on and continues to use them.
So who was important for you, Yvonne?
Well, I would say that I've always taken kind of a team or more network kind of approach to mentoring. So I'm usually engaging with several mentors at one time, informally or formally, and I think that as professionals, we often seek out the high-profile mentor, the affable mentor, the person that everyone wants to be in your organization. So I do try and keep great relationships with those individuals in the organizations I'm at. But also, I think what's really underappreciated is the professionals that are accomplished, but that are viewed as kind of difficult, or that have personalities that rub a lot of people the wrong way. And I've often made an effort to enlist those type of mentors in my team, because I found that if they're successful, that means that they must be doing something right? They must be doing something really right if they're successful, if they've attained success in their career. And the fact that a lot of people in your organization might view them as difficult might be something that you can use to your advantage, because you'll find that a lot of professionals don't seek them out for advice. A lot of their professionals are not being very cordial with them. So when you reach out to them, they're more than ready to open up and to impart the wisdom that they've gained, because no one else is asking them for that. So that's definitely been a big part of my mentorship approach, is to just seek out the successful professionals that have a rough reputation, a little rough around the edges, and I've found that often that those type of mentors give me the most direct advice, the best advice, the advice that other more senior professionals would want to kind of talk around the edges of subjects, whereas the difficult ones, they're going to tell you straight up what's going on, what they see ahead of you, the obstacles that you can't perceive. They're just going to tell you straight up. They're not going to talk around the edges of it.
So I'm going to ask you one more thing before we turn it over to the audience, but it's a lightning round, I promise you. So really quick, I'm gonna start with you, and then we'll just go down the row. What is the one thing we didn't speak about that before the students and the alumni from NYU leave tonight that you want them to know that's going to be pivotal towards whatever their career is, particularly in a global workplace? Remember, lightning round.
Okay, so I'm a big advocate, whether you're recruiting, you're in the recruiting process, whether you're on the ground, at your first job, and using guerrilla tactics. Do what the person sitting in the cubicle next to you is not going to do. Talk to the person that they're not going to talk to. Speak up in the meeting that they're not going to speak up in. Add value in a way to differentiate and distinguish yourself in any form or fashion that you can. Get noticed, but get noticed for your excellence and for good things.
Kevin?
Ask questions. Ask lots and lots of questions, right? The more you guys know, the better informed you'll be, the better conversations, the more impactful you'll be as you're discussing things with people. That's of mentors, that's of colleagues, that's of friends, of anyone you could think of. Ask questions as you're trying to think about what your career is going to look like. Domestic, international, doesn't matter. Just ask a lot of questions.
Chuck?
Focus on results.
This is a man who understands the lightning round.
Wow.
Jasmine?
Brevity.
Get used to being uncomfortable and like it.
Okay. Mr.
Kind
Ong.
of took part of mine. I was going to say, don't be afraid to screw up every once in a while.
Great. So we're going to turn it over to you for questions, but please join me in thanking this fabulous panel. James has a microphone if anybody has a question, and so does Lauren. If anyone would love to ask a question, we'd love to hear from you. I know the first question is always tough.
There we go.
Are they on? I guess we're going to find out. So, my name is Nicholas Dale. I'm a graduate from the University of Edinburgh. I'm here thanks to my father, Gordon Dale. I actually had a question for all of you regarding students who speak multiple languages, find themselves in an ever-interconnected area, who come back to the United States and seek to find meaning amongst their peers. How do they understand a way to connect with the job market, which may be different from what they've experienced overseas, but also how do they find the mentors, even within the academic structure that they have, when there isn't really a good way to do it? Asking questions is important, but is there some sort of outreach that they can do, even more so than what we've discussed? Thank you.
Yeah, I would recommend joining trade associations. A number of trade associations would offer junior memberships that would be at a lower cost versus more advanced professionals, or if you were already attached to a company or a corporation. And that's a way for you to get exposure to programming in your field and get exposure to professionals that could become those mentors for you.
Anyone else want to take a stab at this?
I think that when you're trying to connect with people outside of your general network, to me, I kind of look back on the one tool that your generation has that previous generations didn't have the advantage of using, and that's social media, in particular LinkedIn. If you look at just the sheer volume of different LinkedIn groups, whether it's an industry group, whether it's an international group, whether it's an alumni group, you've just got so many people essentially at your fingertips. I know that the NYU alumni group, say for example, has got to be a great place to start. Now, if you didn't go to NYU, I'm sure your own alma mater would certainly have similar types of mechanisms out there. And I think that that's where you get, in my opinion, the best ratio of success in terms of reaching out to complete strangers and having the opportunity to maybe connect with them in some form or fashion. Because if you look at all the different loyalties that people have when they start building these networks, I usually find that school ties are usually the strongest more often than not. I can't tell you the last time I didn't respond to a LinkedIn question from a University of Richmond graduate that reached out to me, even though I have no idea who they are, even though I don't think there's any chance that they could come to work for Maximus. It's hard for me not to at least respond to the email and try to be helpful in some form or fashion. So.
Okay. Who has another question?
In the back.
Yeah, I'll go in the back.
Sorry. Hi, I'm Jen. I'm a NYU Tisch alumna from 2010. I just moved to DC in August, and I work for PAI, which is we do international global advocacy for reproductive health. So I'm new to international development. I came from the domestic movement for women's health. So my question would be kind of, what would your advice be about exploring the global community? That's a little bit daunting to me. It's like figuring out the landscape on a global scene. It seems very overwhelming. It's a lot to learn, a lot to tackle. What would you guys say would be the thing that you found most helpful when you were starting your global career and kind of bridging that divide?
Well, so I can start. I mean, I guess for me, the way that sort of played out had a lot to do with the resources that my company offered to help kind of educate me, if you will, right, on what the global landscape looks like. Now, not every situation affords you those kinds of resources, but there's so much information that's out there, right? There's so many things that you can be researching yourself, right? You know, even taking some of what Dave was kind of saying about, you know, social media and social networking as a means to try and understand a little bit more about the global landscape and the global environment, I would leverage that, right? I would think about using that as a mechanism by which to, you know, learn as much as you can and connect with others who do have the knowledge that you're looking for. So that would be how I would be thinking about it at this point.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, the issue of sort of women's reproductive health, that's, you know, an international global issue. It's not something that's particularly sort of local or regional or very niche. So I think in the same with the work that you're doing with PAI, I'm sure there's sort of like equivalent, if not, you know, officially, you know, sort of sister organizations, there must be the equivalent in, you know, if there's a particular region you're interested in or a particular country, you know, chances are there is one that's quite similar. So, and you never really, I would just, you know, definitely encourage you to reach out. You can never really tell what a simple email can do. That's how I got involved with my work at Capal. I was looking for sort of like-minded Asian American professionals based in DC, and I was like, where are they? And then I shot, you know, just an email to info@capal.org, and I heard back. So I think you never really know, and it seems like a cold call at first, and you know, and you might be like, well, it's totally random, and they're not going to respond or care. You'd be surprised. I think people are looking for sort of like-minded advocates a lot.
Great. I think we have one more question.
So my name is Daniela, and I actually am a student at NYU DC. I hope to do international work one day. So for those who have done international work or work abroad, how do you adjust to different cultures? And if you have any tips for a student like me who wants to study human rights, how to adjust to different cultures and how to get settled in a different environment.
I can start. I think you get the conversation rolling. A couple of, about 6 or 8 months ago, I actually was bid to a project that Maximus was thinking about bidding on in Saudi Arabia. And I was actually supposed to go over there, and due to some travel visa issues, for whatever reason, I couldn't get the visa in a very quick period of time. So I ended up having to do the whole transaction, kind of the sales pitch, via video conference. So I didn't have to actually physically go there, but I had to put myself in a position where I could make it seem like I was there. And one of the things that I sought out very aggressively is I need to understand cultural immersion in Saudi Arabia. How do the business people greet themselves? How do they address themselves? How do they interact? And I literally put myself through a full day and a half's worth of training that they have that I was able to find. We actually found a private contractor that comes in and teaches our employees, if they're going to engage with the Saudis, these are the appropriate mannerisms to think about. These are the types of language that they use. Huge eye-opener, to be honest with you, and little subtleties that I'd never thought of. And I remember being scared to death because I literally had to get up, I think, at 2 o'clock in the morning to go to the office to do this video conference call at 4 o'clock. So I'm barely awake on top of that and having to think through all these other complexities that I wouldn't normally think about just in a general sales pitch or a speech. And it was really a huge eye-opener. You've got to do a lot of preparation, I think. You've got to really do some homework up front.
I mean, I think so. It's so important to be passionate about what you do, and it sounds like you have a passion for human rights work. So what I would do is I would look for a human rights organization that you feel strongly about their mission, and I would seek to work with them. And as you know, as you go overseas, it's going to be very situational as far as what country you're in. And you're going to have an opportunity working with your organization to sort of position yourself and become acclimated in that culture. But I think I would approach it through the human rights organization that you want to work for, and then you could be anywhere in the world. And then once you get there, try to acclimate yourself and have that cultural experience and learn from that. And then you can build on that. Once you have that, maybe you've picked up some language skills, you know what it's like to live overseas, then the next position you're going to be that much more qualified for, and it might be in a different country, and you can sort of repeat sort of the process over again. But my advice would be to go with your passion, which is human rights work, and it'll flow from that.
So one thing, so I mean, I guess circumstances to an extent dictate how you might want to approach it, right? So if you're going to be in a specific location for an extended length of time, that may be very different than if you're sort of popping in for a week, or if you will, to do whatever you're going to do. Over the years, I've just kind of accumulated a few little tricks that have helped me. So if I know I'm going to be in a particular country for an extended period of time, I'll try to go a little bit early, try to just sort of walk the streets a little bit, immerse myself a little bit in the culture, just get to know what's going on, just my surroundings, right? So that I'm not massively immersing myself literally the moment I get off the plane, right? Things like that for me have helped a lot, right? You know, there's other little things you can try and do. I mean, through my network, I have friends in different places, right? And at times I'll try to, reach out to them in advance just to kind of understand from them kind of what the climate looks like, what sort of cultural things do I need to think about. Typically, I only get so much, but at least it makes me feel a little more comfortable. And that always helps, right? Some of it's the confidence that you have as you come into the situation, which will allow you to acclimate that much faster.
And I would add, at this stage in your academic career, you have to really learn from yourself and your environment. You're in the right place. If you could think about it, if there was someone that did not want to work in the international field, they should not be a NYU student. They should not be a NYU DC student, because as an NYU DC student, you're going to be surrounded by classmates that are international. It's very hard to be an American right now and not have experiences in diverse communities here domestically. So just think about those experiences that you have domestically and how you can apply that type of diversity learning that you've already faced here, and think about what that means and how you can apply that as you start to venture out here at NYU DC, maybe next semester, Abu Dhabi, So just learn from your environment. Keep doing the things that you're doing right now. You're getting started on the right path right now.
Well, we've run out of time. I just got the sign from James. But thank you again, whether you're here live or you are watching virtually. We really appreciate you being part of this. Have a great night. Thanks again for joining us.